Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So I'd like to welcome everyone this evening. So a few days ago, uh, a group came to visit me at the monastery. It was a very small group of students from a Bible college, not too far from here in the province, and they all had very interesting questions and very interesting conversation. So of course, generally for in Western countries, it's quite unusual to have, a Westerner who's, gone to Thailand and ordained as a monk, and especially in somewhere like here from Winnipeg. I think there are only currently two two of us from the whole province who have ordained as monks and are currently monks. So it's quite an unusual thing. And the people who came, had a lot of questions about, about Thailand, living in Thailand, about being a monk, about living in monasteries, and it just turned into a lot of great conversation, but a lot of stories about my time living in Thailand, about my time training at Wat Pah Nanachat, back in the old days. So even now it's this was almost 20 years ago. It was 19 years ago I went. And so even now that area of Thailand has completely changed. It's really developed very quickly in the last 20 years. And the monastery as well has changed and developed a lot in the last 20 years. So when I had arrived in Thailand back in 2006 in Ubon Ratchathani is where the monastery is. Along the main highway going from the city to the monastery, there's very little. It wasn't very developed. There was on the side of the road at one point there was a big place where they'd auction off water buffalo, and it was just made out of like driftwood and grass roofs on it. And then the village in front of the monastery has this night market they would run a couple times a week. And even there, it was all, when I arrived, it was all, everything was made out of bamboo and grass roofs and stuff. And now it's a big tin roof, a big properly developed. And along the highway, you have big furniture stores now and electric vehicle stores now. So, car dealerships for electric vehicles. So everything has really changed a lot. Um, and in the monastery too, a lot of the buildings are new. The style has changed a lot of the training. Still, it has a lot of the basics is the same, but it's changed a lot. And that's just, the nature of how things are. The Buddha did say everything is impermanent. So, if you start really clinging and wishing it was the way it was, back then, you're going to suffer. When you start thinking, oh, back in my day, it was like this, it was so much better back then, and you get attached to that, you're really going to suffer. But one of the things I really brought to mind in talking to these people who came to visit about time in the monastery, and then also this morning speaking with the group which came for the Saturday morning uh, Dhamma program, was this idea of cross training. And in the monastery, you do a lot of cross training. So this is just my own personal term for it. I'm sure other people would have different ways to describe it. But so cross training is, as far as I understand it, when you're doing one sport, you have other sports or other activities outside of your sport, which you use to support your sport. So, for example, if you're a swimmer, um, you do most of your training swimming in the pool, but you also do training in the gym. You do running, you do lifting weights, you do exercises with medicine balls and stuff. And even though it's not actual swimming, that activity you use to support the swimming. And so it becomes the same with Dhamma practice. And especially at, a training monastery, there's a lot of this cross training. There's a lot of these activities and these things we do outside of our formal meditation, outside of what we'd consider like our formal Dhamma practice. But they're used to help us, with our Dhamma practice, help us develop these certain mind states, these certain uh, attitudes, these certain paramis, like these perfections, those spiritual qualities, that we're working on developing to help us with our practice, and also to wear away at some of our kilesas, some of our defilements, our greed, hatred, our delusion, our like coarser senses of self, and and so a lot of these practices we do really work at wearing these away. So uh, when you come to the monastery and really take on the training and decide to ordain and stay there, a lot of these practices aren't optional. They're very much mandatory and very much part of the monastic life, and especially the life at Wat Pah Nanachat, the International Forest Monastery. So back when I arrived, it was a very strict monastery. It was you were there was very high expectations of you, and you were expected to follow them. So one of the things is when you ordain at the monastery, um, you fit into this very hierarchical system. And it's a lot of times, when we hear hierarchy, we think like it's very strict, very rigid, very oppressive. But it's very much actually the opposite. From my experience, is there's always this flexibility because the hierarchy in the monastery is and our order of seniority, it's all based completely on when we ordain. So the people who ordain before you are always before you. The people who ordain uh, after you are always after you. The people who ordain with you are going to be sitting beside you for the rest of your life. So you have to and so you got to learn to get along with them, right? So you've got to in this system, you have to learn when how to behave when you speak to a senior monk, how to behave when you speak to someone junior. So you're always changing. There's always this flexibility and fitting into the situation. And especially, when we arrive at the monastery and we're junior monks, we're right at the bottom. We're right at the bottom of the hierarchy. And for a lot of us, that's something we've never really experienced before. Even when we're in high school and working at like a fast food joint, and we're the new person there, we're still not, we're at the bottom, but we're still kind of on the same level as most people except for the managers. But when you come to the monastery, you're really at the bottom. And this really forces you to train, forces you to confront this sense of self. And that I should be like this, I should be like that, people should be listening to me and respecting me. So there was this story. There's always a monk who's in charge of training the new people. So the pacows, these are the white robed eight precept ones, and the novices, and there's always a monk in charge of training them. So the one who was in charge of training me and my group, he was telling us the story of from years before when they had this American layman come, and he had been a soldier beforehand, and one of the things is in the monasteries, we clean the washrooms every day, like in the forest monastery. And there's lots of toilets, lots of washrooms in the monastery. And so one of the chores you do is cleaning washrooms. I've cleaned countless washrooms since I've been a monk. And this man arrived, wanted to ordain, so he was given a chore of cleaning the washrooms, and he had to leave the monastery because of it. He was explaining like, this was like a punishment when he was in the military, and he couldn't bring himself to clean washrooms. Like it was just his perception of this, his feelings on this was it was so low he couldn't do it, and he couldn't stay. Whereas, for the rest of us, it's just something, you work on, you work on that. It helps wear down that sense of me, of I'm this great, I'm like this. And we use it as this way of training. And another way that we would train in the monastery when we're junior monks is we have this thing we call upa talking. So this is where you become kind of like an assistant or a helper or an attendant to a senior monk. So we would have it, and it's kind of similar to like in the older style and like the traditional style of like apprenticeship. So it used to be if you were say apprenticing to become, a mason or a carpenter or any type of trade like that, a shoemaker or something back in the old days, you take on the an apprenticeship. And, part of that would not just be learning from him how to, do carpentry, but there would be this, you'd have to do stuff to kind of humble yourself too. You would clean up the shop. You'd clean up the storefront or the shop for him. You would maybe clean his clothes or, all these things, as like to assist them because they're doing this, service to you of teaching you this, but also to really, really help humble yourself. And so we have a similar system for the new monks is, we have this system where you upatak, you become an attendant to a more senior monk. And you only do them for short periods. It usually would last like 2 weeks, and then, they would all change. But so you would do these duties like you would uh, take their bowl for them when they go out on Bindabat for walking out to the village and then give them their bowl. After the meal, you'd wash their bowl for them. You'd go and you'd clean the area and sweep around the outside of their dwelling, like the kutis, the huts they stay in, and all these kind of little duties you do to help them out. And there's many of the benefits to this. So one of them was it would really like, teach you to be humble. And Lumpur Suchat, he says that the more humble you are, the more that's actually going to assist in your development of samadhi or concentration, in your meditation, having that mind state of being humble. But one of the other like advantages of it is it really teaches you to get outside of yourself. So you're not just focusing on what I want, what's best for me right now, what my mood is. I want to do this, I don't want to do that. So, it's like, okay, I have to think of what's this other person's needs. What's what can I do to help this other person out? I'm going to do his thing before take care of sweep his kuti or do this duty for him before I do it for myself. So it can really like break down some of those coarser um, uh, sense of self, sense of entitlement, sense of I should do this, I should do that. And I guess in lay life, probably people who have kids probably know exactly what I'm talking about, taking care of kids and doing all that kind of work, or when they have like an elderly parent who needs to be taken care of, and you can see how like when you take it up in the right way, it can really have a lot of spiritual development and a lot of developing these qualities of these baramis, like putting forth effort, practicing patience. And one of the other benefits of it is because everything we do is in seniority, like we eat sitting in a line based on our seniority. We go on our alms round in a line based on our seniority. So sometimes it can be difficult for someone new at the one end of the line to actually get to know and create a friendship, a relationship with someone at the top of the line, some of the more senior monks. And especially for someone like me who was just deathly shy when I arrived. And so when you do that and you have this you're talking, taking care of this senior monk, it actually really allows you to create this friendship with them. You get to know them on a one-on-one um, basis. Like you walk with them, you chat with them, and so it's really like this great way of training to develop and get to know the senior monk. And of course, one of the ones, I've talked about many times before as part of the training we had there was, of course, we had group practice. So morning chanting, morning meditation, evening chanting, evening meditation. And again, doing this um, it was a really great way to teach you to be able to push through that tiredness, to be able to push through those feelings that come up because the morning bell rang at 3 o'clock in the morning. And especially, and then there would be periods when you'd be a junior monk and you'd actually be the person who had to ring the bell. So you didn't have the bell to wake you up. You had to wake up on your own at maybe 2:45 in the morning and go and ring the bell and make sure it was on time. And if you forgot to ring the bell, you were for sure going to hear from it from several other monks in the morning asking, "Hey, Nando, what happened? I didn't hear the bell this morning." So and this really trained to be able to wake up in the morning and you feel tired, you feel oh, I don't want to do it, or today I'm just not really on my game today, but it's part of what we have to do. So you learn to be able to push through those feelings and push through those moods which can come up and actually be able to do it. So it was one of these uh sayings that Lumpur Cha used to have was like, if you feel like practicing, practice. If you don't feel like practicing, still practice anyways. So it's very much that really helped us on that because like I've said many times, before we started doing group practice, when I would try to do it on my own, I'd wake up with the bell, but then I'd go back to bed and at some point my back would be sore. I'd lie down for a bit and then fall asleep. So doing that really trained us to be able to, push through those, overcome come that. And so yeah, so that really these are just kind of a few of the things, we did as, part of our training at Wat Pah Nanachat, and part of living there, part of um, just the cross training that was happening in the environment, and just the way the system was set up for us as junior monks, that we went through this whole training and developing these paramis, these spiritual qualities, these perfections, really working away at some of our coarser defilements are, and preventing other ones from arising. So one of the things also we have to do at Wat Pah Nanachat, which is standard of all Ajahn Chah monasteries in Thailand, is we have to go on an alms round every day. So every day, right at the crack of dawn, we take our bowls and we go into groups and walk into the village to uh, uh, collect food. So we silently walk through the village and people will put food in our bowls. Sometimes it's just a ball of sticky rice. Sometimes it's a bit of a curry, might be a banana. And especially back then, it's really changed a lot because, the country's developed a lot. The village, there's people are more prosperous now. But back then, when I first arrived, it was a lot of it was just sticky rice. You didn't get a lot of other stuff. But doing this daily alms round, like Lumpur Cha used to have this saying, he said, "My bin, my gin." So he said, if you don't go on Bindabat, you don't eat. The exception was if you were sick, but but yeah, you don't Bindabat, you don't eat. So it really pushed you to do this. And it really, being able to actually, go on these the Bindabat. It's actually really nice. You're out walking, going through the village or going through the fields and stuff to get there. So it's a really nice walk, but some of them are quite far. We had this one, behind the monastery, which I think is about 5 kilometers long, and it used to be the way back, you'd be walking on these like big sharp rocks the whole way back. Now they've paved it, so it's actually quite easy. But back then it was, a bit of a practice doing it. But actually going out and, seeing the people who offer you food every day, you really develop this sense of gratitude. Oh, actually, my life is sustained through the generosity of others. Other people do practice are doing this. Like, so it's not just that, oh, what did someone bring me today? It's like, oh, actually I going out and seeing this, and it's really nice and become really beautiful. So my the first couple of rains retreats when I was a novice and a monk, I just ate the food I received on Bindabat on my alms round. I didn't have any of the food offered in the monastery, and I went on the furthest alms round route, which gave the least food. And because it was just the way it worked out, there was not going to be anyone going to that village. The senior monk had wanted to shut down that alms round for the rains retreat, and the villagers, came and asked. They're like, "Can someone go on it? Can someone, go on this alms round?" So I volunteered, and had a great time doing it. Um, And but again, it really develops this gratitude to it. So there was one of the old ladies in the village figured out that I was just eating food from the village. So instead of just giving me the ball of sticky rice, she'd almost like pack me a little lunch every day. And it was really sweet. It was like, it'd be like a dried fish and like maybe a bit of a sweet as well with it. But it was just really sweet that, she sees that, oh, he's just eating this. And again, it really helps develop that sense of gratitude and that, knowing that they're doing this real act of kindness towards me. And so yeah, so just having these people come in and telling stories about back in the old days at Wat Pah Nanachat, these some of these things had just come up to mind, and I'd like to have shared them with you all this evening. I'd like to offer that to everyone as a bit of a reflection for this evening.